Sometimes the smallest question can reopen a heart that has been closed for years. A light autumn rain drifted across the cemetery as Ryan Mitchell sat alone on a weathered stone bench facing a polished granite headstone. The world knew him as the billionaire CEO who built one of the largest technology companies in America. Financial magazines called him a visionary. Business networks followed his every move. Investors trusted him with billions of dollars. Yet none of those things mattered on this particular afternoon. Here, among rows of silent memorials and fading flowers, Ryan was simply a husband who still missed his wife. 5 years had passed since Sarah's death. 5 years since the hospital room. 5 years since the last time he heard her laugh. Yet every month, without fail, he returned to the same place carrying a fresh bouquet of white roses. The cemetery caretaker knew him by name. The visitors recognized him from television. Nobody disturbed him. They understood that grief was one of the few things money could never negotiate with. Ryan placed the flowers carefully beside the headstone and stared at the engraved letters. Rainwater glistened across the polished surface. He tried to say something, as he always did. Sometimes he spoke for minutes. Other times he sat in silence. Today, the words would not come. The emptiness felt heavier than usual. Around him, the cemetery remained peaceful. Trees swayed gently in the cool breeze. Fallen leaves drifted across the pathways. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell echoed softly through the gray afternoon. Then he heard laughter. Ryan looked up. A young girl skipped along a nearby walkway holding her mother's hand. She could not have been older than 7. Her bright yellow raincoat stood out against the muted colors of the cemetery. Beside her walked a woman carrying a small umbrella. She appeared tired but kind, the sort of person who smiled even when life gave her reasons not to. The little girl suddenly stopped walking. Her eyes settled on Ryan. Children often stared at him because they recognized him from magazines or advertisements. This felt different. The child studied him with simple curiosity. Then she gently tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mom," she asked. The woman looked down. "What is it, Lily?" The little girl pointed toward Ryan. "Why is that man sitting here all alone?" The mother immediately looked embarrassed. "Lily, sweetheart, that is not polite." Ryan almost smiled. The child did not seem convinced. Instead, she continued staring at him. Then she did something completely unexpected. She stepped closer. Her mother followed nervously. Ryan watched as they approached. Most adults avoided conversations in cemeteries. This little girl seemed completely unafraid. She stopped a few feet away and tilted her head. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then she asked a question so innocent and so unexpected that Ryan felt his breath catch. "Sir," she said softly, "do you need a family?" The rain continued falling. The cemetery disappeared into silence. Ryan stared at the child, unable to answer. Her mother looked horrified. "I am so sorry," she said quickly. She does not always think before she speaks. But Ryan barely heard her. Because for the first time in years, someone had asked him a question nobody else ever dared to ask. Ryan remained seated long after Emma Brooks and her daughter walked away. The rain had nearly stopped, but the question lingered in the air as if it had become part of the cemetery itself. "Do you need a family?" Nobody had asked him something so direct in years. Business reporters asked about growth. Investors asked about profits. Employees asked about strategy. Friends, when they still tried, asked whether he was doing all right. But a family? The word felt unfamiliar. Dangerous, even. Ryan looked once more at Sarah's headstone before finally standing. He adjusted his coat and walked toward the cemetery exit. Yet every few steps, he found himself glancing back toward the path where the little girl had disappeared. That evening, Ryan returned to a penthouse overlooking the Chicago skyline. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed millions of lights stretching across the city. The residence occupied nearly the entire top floor of the building. It contained everything money could buy: custom furniture, original artwork, a private library, a dining room large enough for 20 guests. Yet as always, only one place at the table was used. Ryan loosened his tie and sat down in silence. The housekeeper had left dinner warming in the kitchen. He barely touched it. Across from him sat an empty chair. Sarah's chair. 5 years had passed, but he had never moved it. He never allowed anyone to sit there. Some habits became traditions. Others became monuments. Later that night, Ryan wandered into the library. Shelves lined every wall. Awards and photographs filled display cases. Most visitors viewed the room as evidence of success. Ryan saw something else. A museum dedicated to a life that no longer existed. His eyes settled on a framed photograph taken nearly a decade earlier. Sarah stood beside him on a beach, laughing at something outside the frame. Ryan stared at the image for several moments. Then he remembered the little girl again. Lily. Her yellow raincoat. Her fearless honesty. The memory almost made him smile. The next morning, Ryan arrived at Mitchell Technologies before sunrise. The headquarters occupied an entire city block of downtown Chicago. Employees often joked that the building never slept. By 8 o'clock, executives filled conference rooms and hallways. Meetings began. Reports arrived. Decisions were made. Ryan moved through the day exactly as expected. To everyone around him, he appeared focused and composed. Yet something felt different. During a strategy presentation, he caught himself staring out the window instead of listening. During a board discussion, he found himself wondering whether Emma had made it home safely through the rain. It made no sense. He did not know her. He knew even less about Lily. Yet their brief appearance had disrupted a routine that had remained unchanged for years. Around lunchtime, Ryan left the building and walked several blocks to a small cafe he occasionally visited. It was quiet, unpretentious, and largely ignored by the financial crowd. He liked that. As he stepped inside, the smell of coffee and fresh bread filled the air. Conversations blended into a soft background hum. Ryan approached the counter, then stopped. Near a window sat a familiar figure, Emma. She wore a simple navy sweater and was working on a laptop while reviewing several papers spread across the table. Beside her sat Lily, coloring in a notebook and occasionally sipping hot chocolate. Neither had noticed him. Ryan hesitated. The logical choice would have been to order coffee and leave them alone. Instead, he found himself watching. Emma appeared tired. Not exhausted. Just the kind of tired that came from carrying responsibilities alone for too long. Yet every few minutes, she paused her work to smile at Lily. Every time she did, the little girl smiled back. The exchange seemed effortless. Natural. Warm. Ryan realized he had not witnessed something like that in years. Then Lily looked up, spotted him across the room, and immediately waved with the enthusiasm only children possess. The gesture was impossible to ignore, and what happened next would make it even harder for Ryan Mitchell to continue living entirely alone. Ryan could have pretended not to see her wave. For years, that had been his preferred solution whenever life attempted to become personal. A polite nod, a brief smile, then a return to work, meetings, schedules, and carefully controlled distance. But Lily's enthusiasm made that impossible. Before he realized what he was doing, he found himself walking toward their table. "Hi," Lily said proudly as if introducing herself to an old friend. "I told Mom you would come over." Emma looked genuinely surprised. "Lily," the little girl shrugged. "What? He looked lonely yesterday." Ryan laughed softly before he could stop himself. The sound surprised everyone, including him. Emma smiled apologetically. "I am sorry about her. She has a habit of saying exactly what she thinks." "I noticed," Ryan replied. Lily pointed toward the empty chair across from them. "You can sit there if you want." Ryan glanced around the cafe. Every other seat was available. Yet somehow the invitation felt sincere in a way most invitations were not. He sat down. For a moment, nobody spoke. Emma closed her laptop and gathered several papers into a neat stack. Ryan noticed spreadsheets, invoices, and accounting forms. "Working lunch?" he asked. Emma nodded. "Something like that." Lily immediately answered for her. "Mom has 2 jobs." Emma sighed. "Lily." "What?" "It is true." Ryan looked at Emma. She gave a small, embarrassed smile. "I do bookkeeping for a few local businesses in the evenings." Ryan nodded. The information fit the image he already had of her. Someone carrying more responsibility than most people realized. Lily took another sip of hot chocolate. "What do you do?" she asked. Emma nearly choked on her coffee. "Lily, everybody knows what he does." The little girl looked confused. "I do not." Ryan found himself smiling again. "I run a technology company." Lily considered this carefully. "Is that fun?" The question caught him off guard. Investors never asked if his job was fun. Board members never asked if he enjoyed it. They asked about growth percentages, market share, and shareholder value. Ryan thought for a moment. "Sometimes." Lily nodded as if she completely understood. "My favorite thing is drawing." She opened a notebook and proudly showed him several colorful sketches. Most were pictures of houses, parks, and smiling families. One drawing immediately caught Ryan's attention. It showed a mother, a little girl, and an empty figure standing beside them. The outline had no face, no details, just an empty space. Who was that? Ryan asked gently. Lily looked down at the drawing. Nobody yet. Emma's expression shifted slightly. Not sadness. Something more complicated. Ryan sensed he had accidentally stepped into a conversation that carried history. He changed the subject. For nearly 20 minutes they talked about simple things. School projects. Favorite books. The best hot chocolate in Chicago. None of it was remarkable. Yet when Ryan finally stood to leave, he felt lighter than he had in months. As he walked toward the exit, Lily called after him. Will we see you again? Ryan paused. The question should have been easy. Instead, he found himself unexpectedly hoping the answer was yes. Maybe, he said. Lily grinned. That means yes. Outside, the afternoon sun had broken through the clouds. Ryan stood on the sidewalk for a moment watching people move through the city. The familiar pressure that usually sat on his shoulders felt strangely distant. Back inside the cafe, Emma watched him disappear into the crowd. She did not fully understand why their brief conversation felt important. Yet something about Ryan Mitchell seemed different from the version she had seen in magazines and interviews. The billionaire appeared successful, respected, and admired by millions. But she recognized something else behind his eyes. The same loneliness she sometimes saw in her own reflection. And neither of them realized that this unexpected meeting was only the beginning of a connection that would soon become impossible to ignore. Over the next several weeks, Ryan began noticing something unusual. No matter how carefully he tried to return to his old routine, Emma and Lily kept appearing in unexpected places. The first time happened at a neighborhood bookstore on a quiet Saturday afternoon. Ryan had wandered inside looking for a biography recommended by a colleague. As he turned a corner between shelves, he spotted Lily sitting cross-legged on the floor in the children's section with 3 books spread around her like treasure. Emma sat nearby reviewing paperwork while occasionally helping her daughter sound out difficult words. Ryan should have continued walking. Instead, he found himself stopping. Lily noticed him first. Mom, look. Emma glanced up and immediately smiled. Well, this is becoming a habit. Ryan laughed softly. Apparently. An hour later they were still talking. Not about business. Not about money. About books, favorite teachers, and why Lily believed every playground should have a castle. The second encounter happened in a city park. Ryan had taken an unusually rare afternoon away from the office after a difficult week of meetings. He was walking along a tree-lined path when he heard familiar laughter. Lily was racing across a grassy field chasing bubbles while Emma watched from a nearby bench. Ryan felt something unexpected as he approached. Anticipation. The realization unsettled him more than he cared to admit. By the third unexpected meeting, even Emma started joking about fate. This time they crossed paths at a small grocery store. Lily waved enthusiastically from the cereal aisle. Ryan shook his head. You seem to appear everywhere. Maybe you are following us, Lily suggested. Emma nearly dropped the shopping basket. Ryan laughed harder than he had in months. The simple exchange stayed with him long after he returned home. That was the strange thing. The moments themselves were ordinary. A bookstore, a park, a grocery store. Yet each interaction left behind a warmth that followed him into the quiet spaces of his life. One Friday evening, Ryan stood alone inside his penthouse kitchen preparing a simple dinner. The city skyline glowed beyond the windows. The apartment remained as silent as ever. He opened the refrigerator, gathered ingredients, and automatically placed a second plate on the counter before freezing. For years, the habit had remained. 2 plates. Then one returned to the cabinet. Ryan stared at the empty place, sitting for several seconds. The silence suddenly felt heavier than usual. At that moment his phone buzzed. A text message. The sender surprised him. Emma. He opened it immediately. The message was simple. Lily wanted me to thank you for the book recommendation. She finished it in 2 days. Ryan smiled without realizing it. A second message followed. She also insists I tell you that dragons would improve every playground. For the first time in years, Ryan laughed out loud inside the empty apartment. The sound echoed through the room. A few days later, Ryan made a decision that surprised even himself. He invited Emma and Lily to dinner. Nothing formal, just a meal. Emma hesitated at first. Ryan understood why. Accepting invitations from billionaire chief executive officers was not part of most people's normal routines. Eventually, she agreed. The following Thursday evening, Ryan stood inside his dining room, making adjustments to details that never normally concerned him. The table was already set. The food had been prepared, yet something felt different. His eyes drifted toward the empty chair at the opposite end of the table. Sarah's chair. For 5 years, nobody had sat there. Not family, not friends, not business partners. Nobody. Ryan slowly walked toward it. His hand rested against the back of the chair. Memories flooded his mind. Holidays, birthdays, conversations that now existed only in memory. When the doorbell finally rang, Ryan stepped away. Moments later, Emma and Lily entered. Lily immediately admired the city view while Emma thanked him for the invitation. Then Ryan noticed something. Without realizing it, Lily had chosen the seat directly beside the empty chair. The sight stopped him cold, because for the first time in years, that chair no longer felt empty. And the feeling terrified him almost as much as it comforted him. The dinner should have felt ordinary. 3 people sharing a meal, casual conversation, a beautiful city view beyond the windows. Yet for Ryan, nothing about the evening felt ordinary. Every few minutes his eyes drifted toward the empty chair beside Lily. Not because anyone mentioned it. Quite the opposite. Neither Emma nor Lily seemed aware of its significance. Lily simply chatted about school projects, favorite books, and her latest attempt to teach a neighborhood squirrel to trust humans. Emma laughed and gently corrected the more imaginative parts of the story. The sound filled spaces inside the penthouse that had been silent for years. Ryan found himself listening more than speaking. He realized something unusual. He had spent so long living alone that he had forgotten how comforting ordinary conversations could be. There was no agenda, no business objective, no negotiation, just people enjoying each other's company. At one point, Lily wandered into the library while Emma helped clear a few dishes despite Ryan's objections. "You really do not have to do that," he said. Emma smiled. "Old habit." Ryan watched her place a plate in the sink. "You seem to have a lot of those." "Most single parents do." The answer carried no bitterness, just honesty. Ryan leaned against the kitchen counter. "Lily is remarkable." Emma's expression softened immediately. "She keeps me going." The words lingered between them. Ryan understood exactly what she meant. Before he could respond, Lily's voice echoed from the library. "Wow." Both adults followed the sound. They found her standing in front of a large photograph displayed on one of the shelves. Sarah. The image had been taken during a summer vacation years earlier. She stood smiling beneath a bright blue sky. Lily stared at the photograph for several seconds. "She looks kind." The room became quiet. Emma immediately recognized what had happened. "Lily." The little girl turned. "What?" Emma looked uncomfortable. Ryan surprised both of them by answering. "She was." Lily looked back at the photograph. "Is that your wife?" Ryan nodded. "Yes." "She must have loved you a lot." The simple observation hit harder than any sympathy people had offered over the years. Ryan glanced at Sarah's picture. "I think so." Lily smiled. "You still love her?" Again, Ryan nodded. The child seemed satisfied by the answer. "That is nice." Then she wandered toward another shelf, completely unaware that she had just touched a subject most adults avoided. Emma stepped closer. "I am sorry." Ryan shook his head. "Do not be." For the first time, talking about Sarah did not feel like reopening a wound. It felt like sharing a memory. Later that evening, after Emma and Lily had gone home, Ryan remained standing in the library. The apartment was quiet again, yet the silence felt different, less empty. His eyes settled on Sarah's photograph. Then something unexpected happened. For the first time in years, he found himself imagining a future instead of replaying the past. The thought frightened him. The following week brought another surprise. Ryan received an invitation to attend a community fundraising event at Lily's elementary school. Normally, he would have declined without hesitation. His schedule remained packed with meetings and obligations. Yet somehow he heard himself saying yes. The school gymnasium was crowded with families when he arrived. Parents filled folding chairs. Children ran between activity booths. Homemade decorations covered the walls. Ryan immediately felt out of place. Then Lily spotted him. "You came." Her excitement drew several curious looks from nearby parents. Ryan smiled. "I said I would." Emma approached moments later. She looked genuinely surprised. "I thought you might be too busy." Ryan glanced around the room. Children laughed. Families talked. Life unfolded in simple, imperfect ways. Maybe I was tired of being busy. Emma studied him carefully. There was something different in his expression, something lighter. Neither of them noticed the elderly volunteer standing nearby watching the interaction. The woman smiled knowingly before walking away, because sometimes the people around us recognize a new beginning long before we do. The school fundraiser ended with laughter, homemade desserts, and dozens of children proudly showing off projects they had spent weeks creating. As families slowly drifted toward the exits, Ryan found himself helping Lily carry a cardboard castle she had built from recycled materials. The structure leaned slightly to one side, but Lily treated it like a priceless treasure. "Be careful," she warned. "The Dragon Tower is the most important part." Ryan nodded seriously. "I understand the responsibility." Lily seemed satisfied. Emma watched the exchange with a smile she could not quite hide. Somewhere along the way, these moments had stopped feeling unusual. Yet that realization brought its own complications. Outside the school, the evening air was cool. Streetlights glowed softly along the sidewalk. Ryan placed the castle inside Emma's car and stepped back. For a brief moment, nobody spoke. Then Lily hugged him unexpectedly. "Thank you for coming." Ryan froze. The gesture was simple, innocent, yet it touched something deep inside him. "You are welcome," he said quietly. Emma opened the driver's door. "Good night, Ryan." "Good night." He watched them drive away before returning to his own car. The entire trip home felt strangely emotional. Not because anything dramatic had happened, because something important had. For the first time in years, he had spent an evening feeling included instead of merely observed. The following Saturday brought an unexpected storm. Heavy rain swept across Chicago throughout the afternoon. Ryan was reviewing reports inside his home office when his phone rang. The caller surprised him. "Emma." He answered immediately. "Everything okay?" There was a brief pause. "Yes. I hope I am not bothering you." "You are not." More. Silence followed. Then Emma laughed softly. "I should probably explain why I called." Ryan leaned back in his chair. "That would help. My apartment building lost power. Rain hammered against his windows. That is not good." "No. Especially because Lily has a school project due Monday, and the weather forecast says the storm could last all night." Ryan glanced toward the dark clouds beyond the glass. Without thinking, he spoke. "Come here." The words surprised both of them. Emma hesitated. "Ryan, you and Lily can use the library. There is plenty of space. The power is not going anywhere." Another pause followed. Finally, Emma agreed. An hour later, they arrived carrying notebooks, school supplies, and enough snacks to survive a small emergency. The atmosphere quickly became relaxed. Lily spread her materials across a large table while Ryan made hot chocolate. Rain continued pounding against the windows, creating a strangely cozy feeling inside the penthouse. At one point, Lily became completely absorbed in her project, leaving Ryan and Emma alone near the kitchen. For several minutes, they simply watched the storm. Then Emma spoke. "Can I tell you something?" Ryan nodded. She stared out at the city lights, blurred by rain. "The first day I saw you at the cemetery, I recognized something." Ryan looked at her. "What?" Emma folded her arms gently. "Loneliness." The answer caught him off guard. She continued before he could respond. "Not because I am an expert. Because I know what it looks like." The room became very quiet. Ryan turned toward her. Emma's eyes remained fixed on the storm outside. "Lily's father died 8 years ago." The words landed softly, but their weight was impossible to miss. Ryan said nothing. Emma smiled sadly. Everyone assumes time fixes grief. It does not. Rain traced slow paths down the windows. "What does it do?" Ryan asked quietly. Emma finally looked at him. "It teaches you how to carry it." For a long moment, neither moved. Neither spoke. In that instant, Ryan realized something he had never considered before. Emma was not helping him because she pitied him. She understood him, truly understood him, and somehow that realization felt more powerful than anything else. Then from across the room, Lily suddenly shouted, "I need 2 volunteers for dragon testing." The spell broke instantly. Emma laughed. Ryan laughed with her. Yet neither could ignore the truth that had just emerged between them. Because now Ryan knew that he was not the only person carrying a loss that had changed everything. After that stormy evening, something changed inside Ryan. The shift was subtle at first. He still attended meetings, still reviewed contracts, still made decisions that affected thousands of employees. From the outside, nothing looked different. Yet every quiet moment seemed occupied by thoughts of Emma and Lily. More specifically, by the realization that he no longer looked forward to returning to an empty penthouse. For years, solitude had become routine. Now it felt like a choice, and that frightened him. One Tuesday evening, Ryan found himself standing in front of Sarah's grave again. The cemetery was calm beneath a pale autumn sky. A gentle breeze carried fallen leaves across the pathways. He placed fresh white roses beside the headstone and sat on the familiar bench. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he looked at the engraved name and quietly spoke. "I met someone." The words felt strange, almost forbidden. Ryan stared at the stone. Guilt immediately followed. He hated how quickly it arrived. Emma had done nothing wrong. Lily had done nothing wrong. Yet every time he felt happiness returning, a voice deep inside him whispered the same question. "Are you forgetting her?" Ryan closed his eyes. 5 years earlier, he had promised himself he would never move on. At the time, the promise felt noble, loyal. Now he wondered whether it had simply become a prison. Across town, Emma was experiencing a different kind of struggle. She had noticed the change in Ryan too. The hesitation. The moments when he seemed emotionally present one day and distant the next. At first she told herself not to think about it. Ryan had every right to process grief in his own way. Yet as the weeks passed, the distance became harder to ignore. Phone calls grew less frequent. Invitations became less spontaneous. The warmth remained, but something now stood between them. One Saturday afternoon, Lily noticed it before either adult admitted it. They were visiting a neighborhood farmer's market when she suddenly asked, "Did Ryan do something wrong?" Emma nearly dropped the bag she was carrying. "Why would you ask that?" Lily shrugged. "Because you look sad when he does not call." Emma opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. Children often saw truths adults preferred to avoid. Meanwhile, Ryan was sitting alone inside his office overlooking the city. His desk contained a stack of reports requiring immediate attention. He had not read a single page. Instead, his attention remained fixed on a framed photograph of Sarah he kept inside a cabinet drawer. Not displayed. Hidden. Private. He studied the image for several minutes before quietly speaking aloud. "What am I supposed to do?" The photograph, of course, offered no answer. Days later, Ryan made a decision. Not because it felt right, because it felt safer. He began creating distance. He declined invitations, rescheduled plans, buried himself in work. The strategy succeeded exactly as intended. Within 2 weeks, he had restored the lonely routine he once knew so well. Yet something unexpected happened. The loneliness felt worse than before. One evening he returned home after a 14-hour workday. The penthouse was silent. The city lights shimmered beyond the windows. Dinner waited untouched in the kitchen. Ryan walked into the library and froze. On a shelf near the fireplace sat a small object Lily had forgotten weeks earlier. A paper dragon from her school project. Bright green, slightly crooked, completely out of place among expensive books and executive awards. Ryan picked it up carefully. Then he remembered her laughter. Emma's smile. The feeling of belonging that had slowly entered his life. The realization hit him with surprising force. He was not protecting Sarah's memory. He was hiding from the possibility of happiness. The next morning, Ryan arrived at the cemetery before sunrise. Cold air filled the quiet grounds. He stood in front of Sarah's grave longer than usual. His hands remained buried inside his coat pockets. His thoughts tangled between love, loyalty, grief, and hope. Then something caught his attention. Near the base of the headstone, partially hidden beneath a layer of fallen leaves, sat a small weatherproof box he had never noticed before. Confused, Ryan crouched down and carefully brushed the leaves aside. Inside the box was a sealed envelope. His name was written across the front in Sarah's handwriting. And suddenly, everything changed. Ryan stared at the envelope as though it might disappear if he blinked. The handwriting was unmistakable. Sarah's elegant script curved across the front exactly as he remembered. His name. Nothing else. The morning air felt colder suddenly. For several seconds, he simply stood there holding it. Then, with careful hands, he opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. The paper had yellowed slightly with time, but the words remained clear. Ryan began reading. "My dear Ryan, if you are reading this, then I was right about one thing. You are still visiting me." A faint smile touched his face despite the emotion rising inside him. That sounded exactly like Sarah. She always knew him better than anyone. He continued, I know you. I know how loyal you are. I know how deeply you love. And that is exactly why I need you to hear this from me. Ryan swallowed hard. The cemetery remained silent around him. If enough time has passed for you to find this letter, then I hope you have allowed yourself to live. Not survive. Live. Tears blurred his vision. He continued reading slowly. I never wanted my memory to become a wall between you and happiness. Love is not something that runs out. Giving your heart to someone new does not take anything away from what we had. The words hit him harder than he expected. For years he had carried guilt every time he smiled. Every time he felt hope. Every time Emma or Lily made his life brighter. Sarah's letter seemed to understand every fear he had never spoken aloud. Then he reached the final paragraph. If you ever meet people who make your world feel warm again, promise me you will not run away. Promise me you will not sit alone forever because of me. Promise me you will choose life. Ryan lowered the letter. The tears came without warning. Not because the words hurt, because they healed. For years he had been asking himself what Sarah would want. Now he finally had an answer. Later that afternoon, Ryan drove through the city with the letter resting carefully beside him. His destination never changed. Emma's apartment. Yet when he arrived, he remained inside the car for several minutes. Nervous. The realization almost made him laugh. He negotiated billion-dollar contracts without hesitation. Yet knocking on one apartment door suddenly felt impossible. Finally, he stepped outside. Before he reached the entrance, the building door opened. Emma emerged carrying grocery bags. She stopped immediately when she saw him. Ryan. He smiled softly. Hi. Something in his expression made her pause. The distance that had existed for weeks seemed gone, replaced by something calmer, more certain. Are you okay? She asked. Ryan nodded. I think I finally am. Emma looked confused but invited him upstairs. A few minutes later they sat in her small living room while Lily worked on homework nearby. The apartment felt warm, comfortable, real. Ryan glanced around and realized he had missed this more than he wanted to admit. Eventually Emma set down her coffee cup. What happened? Ryan reached into his coat pocket and carefully removed the letter. He explained everything. The cemetery. The hidden box. Sarah's words. Emma listened without interrupting. By the time he finished, tears filled her eyes. Not from sadness. Understanding. She loved you very much? Emma said quietly. Ryan nodded. She did. For a moment neither spoke. Then Emma smiled gently. And she sounds like someone who would be very annoyed with you for hiding from happiness. Ryan laughed. A genuine laugh. That sounds exactly like her. Across the room, Lily looked up from her homework. Why are you both smiling? Emma wiped her eyes. Long story. Lily considered this carefully. Then she grinned. Good stories usually are. Ryan looked at the little girl and felt something settle peacefully inside him. The guilt was gone. The fear was fading. For the first time in years, the future no longer felt like a betrayal of the past. It felt like a gift. And as evening sunlight filled the apartment, Ryan realized he was finally ready to stop looking backward and start walking toward the life waiting in front of him. 1 year later, the first snowfall of winter drifted gently across Chicago. Children laughed on sidewalks. Store windows glowed with holiday decorations. The city seemed softer beneath a blanket of fresh white snow. Ryan Mitchell stood outside an elementary school wearing a dark wool coat and holding a bright purple backpack that definitely did not belong to him. Beside him, Lily bounced excitedly on her feet while explaining the importance of a classroom holiday party. Ryan listened with complete attention, as though the subject were as important as any board meeting he had ever attended. Perhaps it was. Do not forget the cupcakes, Lily reminded him. I already have them. And the permission form? Ryan smiled. Signed yesterday. Lily nodded with satisfaction. Good. You are learning. Across the parking lot, Emma watched the exchange while shaking her head. Some things never changed. Lily still treated every conversation like a negotiation. Ryan still pretended not to enjoy it. Yet everyone knew the truth. The little girl who had once asked a stranger if he needed a family had somehow become one of the most important people in his life. The school bell rang. Lily hugged both adults before running toward the entrance. Ryan and Emma remained standing together as the crowd slowly disappeared inside. Snowflakes drifted through the air between them. She is growing up too fast, Emma said. Ryan nodded. I know. The answer carried the familiar mixture of pride and disbelief shared by every parent. The realization made Emma smile. Months earlier, neither of them would have imagined hearing Ryan speak that way. Life, however, had a habit of surprising people. Later that afternoon, Ryan stood inside the executive boardroom of Mitchell Technologies. Directors, investors, and senior executives filled every seat. Annual reports covered the polished table. The meeting was important. Yet something felt different from previous years. Ryan no longer viewed success as numbers alone. He had spent decades building a company. During the past year, he had discovered the value of building a life. When the meeting ended, one director commented that Ryan seemed happier than he had in years. Ryan simply smiled. He did not explain. Some transformations were impossible to summarize in a business conversation. That evening, the city lights reflected across fresh snow as Ryan drove toward a familiar destination. The cemetery. Emma sat beside him. Neither spoke much during the drive. Words were unnecessary. When they arrived, the grounds were peaceful beneath the winter sky. Ryan carried a bouquet of white roses. Emma carried a small lantern Lily had insisted they bring. Together they walked towards Sarah's grave. Ryan placed the flowers beside the headstone and stood quietly for a moment. The sadness remained. He suspected it always would. But sadness was no longer the only thing he carried. Gratitude stood beside it now. Peace stood beside it. Hope stood beside it. Emma gently placed the lantern near the flowers. Its warm light flickered softly against the stone. Ryan looked at the engraved name and smiled. "Thank you," he said quietly. Emma squeezed his hand. She understood exactly who the words were meant for. They remained there for several minutes before turning back toward the path. As they walked away, Ryan glanced over his shoulder one last time. Then he kept moving forward. For years, every visit had ended with him feeling trapped between memory and loneliness. This time felt different. This time he was going home. Later that night, laughter filled the penthouse that had once felt too large for one person. Lily sat on the living room floor wrapping holiday gifts with more enthusiasm than skill. Emma prepared hot chocolate in the kitchen. Ryan watched both of them from across the room. The sight felt wonderfully ordinary. No grand speeches. No dramatic declarations. Just family. The kind built through kindness, patience, and the decision to stay. As snow continued falling beyond the windows, Ryan remembered the question that had started everything. Do you need a family? A year earlier, he had been unable to answer. Now he finally knew the truth. The family he needed had found him long before he realized he was ready. And for the first time in many years, the future no longer felt empty.